experience working with frameworks and management tools like Figma, Adobe XD, Miro, FigJam, ClickUp, Trello, Zeppelin, Slack, Zoom, Google Meets, Microsoft Suites, and Microsoft Teams. His designs basically are focused on accessibility and inclusivity to create wonderful experiences for people with disabilities without compromising product usefulness or the user's needs. Elvis has worked with a myriad of clients from over 10 countries across the globe. Yeah, so Elvis, you're welcome. You're welcome. And Elvis will be speaking to us this evening on design for accessibility and inclusivity. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. The floor-
Hello again, Fejiro. I hope I got your name right.
yes, you did.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. Um, yeah. So my name is Elvis, and tonight I'll be speaking on design for accessibility and inclusivity. And also, the my aim through this webinar is to help educate, on why designers should focus on accessibility and inclusivity, while designing products. Before I get started, I'll share my screen because I prepared a slide for this. So just give me a sec. I'll do that now. Okay. 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 Um, so can you see my screen? Yeah, please, anyone can
Yes,
see my screen, please signify. All right, thank you. So yeah, the topic for today is design for accessibility and inclusivity. Um, I'm an A11Y product designer working with Imagination Studios. Um, Aside designing for accessibility, before going there, A11Y is simply accessibility. So that's A for now starting the word accessibility, and the word ends with Y. The 11 you have there are just more or less 11 letters. You know, if you spell accessibility, you're gonna have 13 letters. So A between 11 letters and Y. So that's just it's more like an acronym. So yeah, A11Y accessibility is serious topic, and I think a lot of designers, um, you know, do not consider this when working on products. Not because they don't want to, but probably because of you know, lack of awareness, or lack of education on certain aspects like this. So that's what I'm going to be talking on it, because I feel a lot of people should know about this. Okay, before we start, we'll start with accessibility. What is accessibility? Accessibility is the ability of is the ability to access and benefit from some system or entity. So, for products, when designing products, you have to ensure that your products are accessible to all kinds of people, even people with disability. People who are partially disabled, people who are completely disabled. We can see that in terms of low vision, total blindness, and all forms of other disabilities. Well, I'll buttress more into that as we progress. So the next thing I want to talk about is inclusivity, right? Inclusivity is the art of including people, all kinds of people, regardless of their background, regardless of culture, regardless of certain abilities, regardless of, just to ensure that every single person can use your product without encountering challenges. So I'm going to talk about this in relation to design. It's what we call design inclusion. Design inclusion is when products are designed with the intent of ensuring that every single person can use the product without, you know, having issues, or without, where you have some certain group of people, using the product effectively, and you have other groups of people not using it effectively. When the product is designed that way, it's not inclusive enough. A product has to be usable by all kinds of people to be inclusive. Now, there's a form of misconception around availability and usability, from product owners. Availability some, it kind of refers to um, the the ability, the provision of your product or provision of certain products to a wide variety of people, in terms of in terms of reach, in terms of usability and all of that. So that kind of availability. Availability is when products are easily, um, you know, easily provided, or in terms of ensuring that every single person has access, or every single person has that product, with them. So that's availability. For usability, there's a thin line between usability and accessibility, because when I design a product, for example, and I have certain kinds of people use it without encountering any issue, yeah, the product, of course, is usable. But if the product is not designed to consider other people with certain disabilities, because the way someone with good motor skills would use a product, and the way someone who has some issues in terms of movement, or in terms of problems and disabilities, like they can't move their hands properly, those people are going to not, and those people are not going to have the same experience as those who can. So your product can be usable but inaccessible. So you have to ensure that while trying to make your products usable, you factor in accessibility for other people who can use it. So because when you factor in accessibility, you have your product more usable. Because if you can cater to people who have disabilities, then definitely people without that disabilities will have difficulty using your product. So it's a win-win. And we have cases where products could be usable, and at the end of the day, people without disabilities can still find it difficult. So when you factor in accessibility in your design, you you tend to cater for every single person and makes your product more usable. So in terms of I'm going to speak next on affordability. So affordability is also a form of inaccessibility, but this doesn't really have anything to do with design, but this can also affect how people use a product or experience a platform. So um, you know, for this, I'm going to talk on Web3. That's you know, the emerging web era we're currently going into. So Web3 is quite inaccessible as of now, because of certain you know because of certain reasons, like number one could be cost of use. In terms of we look at some of these gadgets, like virtual reality gadgets that allows people to go into the metaverse and all of that. So setting up certain products like these, pose a risk to accessibility through, inaffordability, because not everyone can afford these products. So that is also a form of inaccessibility. And when you're working on products, you have to ensure that you try to make sure that the least person can afford it. You can create various packages, various offers. Okay, even if certain people cannot afford to get the best, they can still get the minimum, product, minimum product cost for what you've built for them. So that's how affordability tends to relate with accessibility, and how people who do not have certain um, access to cash could find these products inaccessible. A11 was speaking about that. WCAG. So WCAG is an acronym for Web Content Accessibility Guideline. This is a guideline provided by the W3C, as World Wide Web Consortium. So World Wide Web Consortium is more like organization that drive towards ensuring that best practices are used for web. Um, Now, I won't really talk much on this WCAG. You can just go to some research on it, to guide you on certain things. But one of the things I'm going to talk about on certain guidelines provided by WCAG are around, I'm going to talk about four of the guidelines. One of them is, when designing, you have to ensure you provide equivalent alternatives to auditory and visual content. So what this means is that definitely people are for content that are centered around audio and visuals. That's for people who can see properly and people who can hear properly. You have to ensure that you provide alternatives to these kinds of content. because those with disabilities might not be able to access this kind of content as much as someone without disabilities can. So that's one of the guidelines. Second guideline is do not rely on color alone. We see a lot of designers try to use color to convey information or convey certain features, certain layout on in design. It's important you do not use just color to relay information, because one of the reasons for people with color blindness, right, they might see the highlights of that color on a certain text as much as you might imagine my okay that I'm designing this and I can see it. You have to also be you have to also take note that in as much as you can see this, you're also designing for people who probably might not be able to see it, right? So you have to ensure that you do not use just color to convey information. So one of the solutions you can try is, instead of using just color to highlight a certain page or a certain text, you can try modifying the text probably by increasing the font weight, probably from medium to bold, just to signify a form of difference across. Let's say you have let's use the navigation bar, for example. Most of us are familiar with navigation across web pages, and you have navigation, home, setting navigation on the website. When you convey, when you try to, lay emphasis on the setting page which a user is currently on through color without altering the font weight or the font size, the font size is not advisable anyway, but without altering the font weight, someone with color blindness might not exactly know where they are on the page. So you have to ensure that aside color, you can also use other forms of, other forms of, design. I don't know what word to use, but yeah, you ensure that you try to use other things to relay information. So let's say, for example, you have color on a certain thing. Outside colors, you can also try to add an outline to a certain page so that even if the person is colorblind, they can see that outline, or they can see the difference in font weight. And when they try to read through the page, you also have to try and things like setting headers to show, okay, you're currently on the home page. You try to repeat, and repetition also helps with accessibility. Try to repeat as much as you can to let people know that, oh, this is exactly what they're dealing with, and this is the exact page they're currently on. So that's also one of the other ways. The third guideline is using markup and style sheets. Okay, this is more or less towards developers. Another guideline I'll talk about is providing context and the retention information. So when you design products, as much as you can for every copy you have on the platform, try to put more context into it, because we have people who have cognitive issues, so they might not have that much comprehension as other people would. So you ensure that you try to put more context to a copy or to a button, so people will try and understand the information you're trying to pass across on that particular design. So that's just that's kind of it on the WCAG guidelines. There are so many guidelines, over 14 of them. So you can just go check it out on Google, and you can find other guidelines. I don't want to spend too much time on that. So another thing I'm going to talk about is Google's free A11Y project. So you can also check this out. I'm going to talk on just one of them, the Euphonia project. So Euphonia project was, it's a project that Google kind of launched some years back on accessibility for people with ALS. ALS is a form of disability, kind of a medical condition. So you can go read more on that. Now, for that, it involves speech. So for people who probably could lose their speech, let's say, for example, through accidents, or probably they were born with speech impairment, they can still they can still convey information through that project. So you can just read more on that project and other projects that Google have come up with to help assist people with disabilities. I'm going to move to the next slide. So the next slide talks about focus areas on accessibility. We have various areas which accessibility could focus on. We have visual, we have auditory, we have mobility and dexterity. then we have cognitive. Visual disabilities range from, you know, color blindness, astigmatism, long-sightedness, short-sightedness, um, partial blindness, total blindness, all kinds of disabilities that have to do with the visuals. So when designing for people with disabilities, you have to ensure that you also factor in visual um, disabilities, factor in visual disabilities so that you can build designs that are more accessible to these kinds of people. The next one is auditory, right? Auditory disabilities have to do with speech or hearing. So auditory disabilities have to do with speech or hearing, where people probably cannot, they lack the ability to speak, or they lack the ability to hear some certain things properly or completely. So you also have to ensure that you factor these people when designing. You can check out the WCAG, like I mentioned earlier in the previous slide. You see some certain guidelines that can assist with that. The next one is mobility and dexterity disabilities. So lots of people have issues, have disabilities in terms of mobility on dexterity. So we have people who are partially capable of moving their fingers, who are completely incapable of moving some parts of their body. There's a certain thing that Apple did, which it's kind of like a hardware design that attaches to wheelchairs and all of that. So this device allows people who have complete immobility to still use interfaces across platforms, across digital products and all of that. So the hardware is attached to the wheelchair, and it allows them to still navigate up and down, left and right. It allows them to still scroll up the screen and all of that. So these are also certain things that some of these products are, some of these companies are working towards, to ensure that lots of people are factored in, especially those with disabilities, when they're designing products for them. So that's it on this. Next one is accessibility by example. So accessibility by example has to do with managing flow. So for managing flow, I'm going to talk a bit on design, designing through the use of mouse and the use of keyboard. It is advisable that when you design products, or for developers also probably might be on this call, that when you design products, you ensure that there is that you factor in the use of keyboard. This is because it's compulsory you do that. There's no exemption. You must do that. It's part of the law that you ensure that your products are designed or developed to factor in the use of keyboard. Now, people with disabilities might find it difficult using the mouse. Some people, not all kinds of disabilities anyway. So for the keyboard, when you design products and you want people to navigate using the keyboard, or probably using voice commands, and other kinds of things, you have to ensure that when you design in some hierarchy forms where interfaces are designed from start to finish. So let's say, for example, you have a search button. Probably might need to share my screen to explain this further. So just give me a sec. Uh, okay. So let me type in Google. Okay. So yeah, this is it. So now let's say, for example, you have this layout, this text field, and you want people to navigate through this page, but without the mouse. So they have to use their keyboards. So when you're using keyboards to navigate or using voice commands, as soon as the mouse comes across this, there's going to be some form of, there's going to be technology that kind of, announces, okay, to the user what exactly they're currently on. So it probably say, okay, you're currently on the search input field, and the next, let's say they tap down with the keyboard, so it moves to this, for example, or it moves to this, or it moves to this. So it's important that when you design, you ensure that things follow the right process. You don't skip this and go straight to this. So people should also know, okay, the people with disabilities should know that when they move from this to this, they have the option to clear, and they also have the option to use search by voice, and they also have the option to just search for whatever it is they want to search for. You can find this in certain cases where people want to make use of radio buttons to select probably their age or their gender before they search. But by the time you design it in such a way that from the text field, they move straight to search without going through the radio buttons, they can't see, right? So because they cannot see, they won't know that they skipped a step. So it's important that the keyboard follows the right order so that they have the choice to know, okay, I can select my age before clicking on search, or I can select this before. So that's just one of those things that has to be factored into design through managing flows. So that's what managing flows is all about. You have to ensure that the flows are properly designed. Then we create visual interactions. Visual interactions can range from, like what I talked about earlier in terms of use of color. So let's say, for example, you have the navigation, like I said, for example, it's important that when users go to a certain page, it's not just colors you use, right? You also use headers, you also use other things, repetitions to try and let them know, okay, this is currently on the page. So that's what that's about. The third thing is ensuring proximity in your design. Proximity is one way to convey, um, it's a great way to convey information in design. So let's say, for example, you want to let users know that there are certain elements in design that are similar to each other. It's important that similar elements in design are closely placed together, which you ensure that they have a form of close proximity with each other. You can design a button that, let's say for the search bar, like I showed earlier, you have the text field and you have the search button. You can design the search button and place it at the far end of the design. That they are not close in proximity. So you have to ensure that there's a form of proximity in your design. And this also, for in terms of accessibility, this also comes around the thing I said earlier, use of keyboard. So if I want to navigate a page and I see that something's far off, the keyboard might not pick that immediately. So it might pick the thing below. So I won't know that there is a search button there because they are distantly placed across each other. So you have to ensure that similar elements are placed together in design. Aside from accessibility, also ensure that you have good design. So if you're designed to be usable, let's say you're even designing for people without disabilities, this is also very important in design, ensuring proximity. It's important whether you're designing for people with disabilities or for people without disabilities. Um, we have certain expectations. This is just more like giving visual guides so people know what to expect when you're designing. So they know, okay, from this is what they're going to expect from on the next page. So that's what that's about. You have writing perfect content. Content is very good. Content is one very important thing that improves the UX of a product. That's the user experience. So you have to ensure that you have the right content, you have proper content, and like I said earlier, you have to ensure that your content have the right context, and you've tried to break things down properly because we have people with cognitive issues that might not understand what you're trying to say. Then we have designing for memory issues. So designing for memory issues, I'm going to talk a bit about this. This can be seen when you're trying to fill in a password on a website. And let's say some people have short-term memory, so they might not be able to remember their passwords. So you have to ensure that people can save passwords. You have to ensure that people can recover certain passwords easily, because let's say someone who doesn't have good memory access to the website, if they lose that password, they probably will have to reset all the time. So to make sure that users don't go through that, ensure that your designs have the ability to auto save passwords, for ability for them to auto fill password also, certain things like that aid in accessibility. The next one is tools and techniques. But before I go through this, I'll talk a bit about other things in design, in accessibility design that should take note of. So designing for accessibility, I'm going to talk a bit on some important things to consider. First thing, do not depend entirely on color information. talked about this. This is useful for users who are unable to have or who are unable or have difficulty distinguishing one color from another. People who are colorblind, people who have low vision, or people who are blind. You have to ensure that they are completely included in your design. Another thing is you have to ensure you have enough contrast between text and its background. So the WCAG also has certain contrast ratios that they recommend. We have a ratio of 5 to 5, 4.5 ratio 1. Then we have, that's between the text and the background. We have a ratio of 4.5 to 1 between the text and background. The minimum should be a ratio of 3 to 1 if the font is at least 24 pixels. So these are certain things you can also find on the WCAG. Now, the guideline helps people with low vision, color blindness, or deteriorating vision in seeing and reading text properly. So you have to ensure that your texts have the right sizing, the right contrast to ensure that people can read them properly. It's very important that so one other good example is let's say colors. There's some certain colors you should not use on certain colors. For example, yellow. When you use a bright yellow, it's advisable you do not use a white text. People will find it very difficult to read. When you use a bright yellow, it's advisable you use a black or a dark text. This ensures proper contrast, ratio to ratio contrast for the user, so that they can, so to ensure legibility in the text and information you're trying to convey. So it's very important you consider that when designing. Another thing to consider is to avoid the use of over. Now, a lot of people like using over effects in their design. Yeah, of course, it has nice interactions, but it's important to avoid over in design because people, like I stated earlier, people who use keyboards to navigate platforms, they cannot, they can't, through keyboard, you cannot activate that over feature. So let's say, for example, you have an image that people will have to over on it before they see some certain text or certain buttons. Once I cannot over on it through the keyboard, that means I won't be able to see those text or buttons. That means your product is inaccessible to me. And that means that product is not usable. So you have to ensure that over, if you are going to use, if you do want to use over, you have to ensure that the over effect is not something that would place a form of priority, especially when it involves CTA or some certain copy that may make your product more usable. So you have to ensure that if I do over on this image, it's not going to do anything at all, aside probably just interaction or probably just animations without the user having to see a button that was probably hidden before the over feature. So it's important you do not use over at all. And if you do want to use over, ensure that no CTA or no elements in the design that would aid the use of your product. It shouldn't be found there on the over feature. That's important, you know that. Another thing is you should ensure form fields are properly labeled. Yeah, ensure you label form fields so that people understand what exactly it is they're currently feeling. Then another thing, alt text. So alt text is for people who cannot see. They're called alternative text. We have platforms like Twitter, platforms like Pinterest, other platforms, they've incorporated alt text in images. So alt text allows users to, that's for people with low vision or people who are completely blind. Alt text allows people like myself and you to, if you include alt text before uploading an image, these alt texts are readable by screen readers, or some form of technology that these blind people use to help them navigate through platforms. So let's say there's no alt text on your image. These screen readers cannot read out the image. So the blind person will not be able to see what that image is all about. So if you include an alt text, probably an image description, they will know, okay, this is a picture of an eagle, this is a picture of a boy, this picture has white and yellow, also it makes the product more inclusive and more usable. So ensure that when you design products, include alt text. So another thing, okay, I think that's most of it. But one more thing you should consider when designing products for people with disabilities, you have to ensure that aside contrast, other things, you have to ensure that these products are easily navigable, because this is not just an issue for people with disabilities, but also could also pose a challenge for people without disabilities. Let's proceed to tools and techniques involved in accessibility. We have voice recognition, we have screen magnifiers, screen readers, and assistive hardware. Assistive hardware, I already talked about that, which are incorporated into wheelchairs to help people who have low motor skills or no motor skills at all to make use of platforms. For voice recognition just it supports hands-free use of products and platforms. So, for example, someone who cannot use their hands, and the funny thing about this does not only help people without disabilities. Let's say, for example, you're in the kitchen and you're trying to dice an onion, so you cannot use your phone at the time. With voice recognition technologies like voice commands, like as we have in Siri on Apple devices, we have Alexa and other forms of voice commands. You can still use your product even if you have your hands tied. You can still use the product. You can still use your phone. You can still access that product. So that's what voice recognition does for people without disabilities. Now, imagine how much more it will be of help to those with disabilities. So people with disabilities who don't have probably their arms and cannot use their hands, they can tell these platforms to they can use this technology to navigate through a platform. So it's important that this is considered when designing products. There's something in terms of voice recognition called dragons. So dragons, DRAG, and that's ONS. So dragons help for more effective voice control. So let's say, for example, you scroll down, and because you say scroll down, probably it's going to scroll one line of text. But with the use of dragons, you can tell a command to scroll 200 pages or scroll 200 lines, navigate to the left 2 times. So those are certain commands that are specific and helps shutting down flows and processes for people with disabilities. So it's important that that is factored in. Then the next one is screen readers. Screen readers help people with disabilities who may find it difficult reading content, and not just people with disabilities, also people who have who probably cannot read properly. So it's more like a literacy aid for users, those with disabilities and those without. So it's important that screen readers are also factored in. So some of these features were designed with people with disabilities in mind, but over time, companies and designers and people have come to understand and realize that even those without disabilities still find these features useful. So that's why it's important that this accessibility is factored into design. Because while you're trying to cater to them, you also make it more usable for people without disabilities. Because people without disability use some of these features, and it makes our life easier. The last one is screen magnifier. Screen magnifier are for people with low vision. So let's say, for example, we have like on Twitter, you can increase the font size, or you have some website, you can increase the page by over 200% or over 100%. So this magnifies the content on the page and makes it more readable for users. So these are certain things that should be considered when designing for accessibility. That brings me to the end of this presentation. But yeah, that's most of it. So if you do have questions, you can ask.
Okay, thank you very much, Elvis. Someone asked a question if you could make the slides available. Can you make that happen, please?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I'll push it. I'll share the link, the Figma link, and because it was designed on Figma, you can have access. So I think I'll just do it now.
Right. Thank you. And I think that's the only question person asked. Yeah, that's the only question we have for today. Thank you very much for we coming to discuss this with us. Okay, I actually have one question though. Yeah, I have one question. Do you have like, is there any course available to learn more about um design accessibility? Do you know of any course available?
Oh yeah, sure. There are courses across LinkedIn Learning, courses across Interaction Design Foundation, IDF. There are courses on Coursera, courses on Udemy. One of them is UX Foundations, Designing for Accessibility. Then there is one, just give me a second, I have to check this one out. So yeah, there's UX Foundations, Designing for Accessibility. Um, there is, let's see, just give me a sec. Yeah, UX Foundations, Interaction Design, Simplifying Web Development with Accessibility, Web Best Practices, also another one. I think I just typed them down. Just gonna type it out on the comments. So
Alright, thank you very much. While he does that, I want to say a big thank you for everyone who's came to listen today. A recorded version of this meeting will be made available on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. When you go to the chat, you see the channel name Design with You to get recordings later this week and recordings of other sessions we've had till date. And our newsletter will be coming out later this week, where you having a rundown of the two sessions we've had this week and last week, and the next speaker I'll be having for next week, and some design tidbits. So I will just give us 5 minutes or 1 or 2 minutes for those who want to copy the link to copy the links before we end the call. Thank you.
okay, I think someone dropped Zainab. She's asking
Okay. Okay, not
okay,
an
okay,
accessibility.
Zainab, I think you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn or any of my. Let me just drop my links for those who want to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you. You can find us on YouTube, Design with You. That's our YouTube channel name. I'm sending it on the chat now. Design with You.
So that's my LinkedIn, and if you go on my website, you have access to my Twitter and other platforms you can reach me on. So Zainab, please do reach out so we can talk more.
Thank you. Any other person has a question before we end? Does any other person have a question? You can send it to the chat box. Mr. Bernard, you can see our YouTube channel now. I have posted it on the chat. Uh, Thank you. You can leave the meeting if you want to now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.